introduce Ken Outen, who's our speaker tonight. Ken has a lot of hats, I think, that he wears. He's a teacher, he's a beekeeper, and he's the president of the Delaware Beekeepers Association. That's for the entire state, right? There's only 3 counties in it. It's a little state. But Ken was kind enough to come and talk to us at this meeting about breeding local bees. And I don't know if I've said it enough times, but this year we're trying to make the theme of every meeting have something to do with local bees and queens. So we're kind of calling it the year of the local bee. So that's going to be a running theme throughout our meetings, and we appreciate you, Ken, and thanks everyone for coming on.
Thank you. First started getting into bees. I have a little farm, I have about 50 acres, where I have about somewhere between 2 and 3 acres of strawberries and about 30 acres of hay and different things. So I was thinking, my strawberries need more pollination. And so a friend of mine was a beekeeper, and I asked him to bring his hive or hives over, and he was like, I'm into that. Okay, I'll get my own then. And so that's how it all started. And also, Suzanne says, I teach biology. So, biology, bees, just kind of, a nice little marriage. So I got into about 3 years of losing my bees over the winter and thinking, man, this is starting to get a little expensive. And I thought to myself, okay, let me study up on this and see if I can do this myself. And so that's kind of how I got to where I am today. So first of all, my interest was I wanted to raise quality queens. And I think I coach some, and I'm kind of competitive, so I didn't want to get into this and be like, oh man, this queen stinks. I didn't want to be that guy. So I said, man, I want to really raise quality queens. So I did a little research, and so for one whole winter, I was just like reading everything I could get my hands on. So I read about 10 books, and some of them were, very popular ones. I read and I read and I read. And for a while, the more I read, the more confused I got. But there were some nice small books that I liked. Larry Connor has a whole series on queen ring essentials, bee sex essentials, increase essentials. They were kind of small books, and it allowed me to understand the bigger books once I read them. So I also perused a lot of websites and just spent a lot of time trying to educate myself on how to raise queens and how to raise them well. So getting into that, there are 3 main reasons why bees make more queens. The first one is supersedure. So the queen's pheromone starts to diminish a little bit. She doesn't lay as well. Her performance is just not up to snuff. And they sense that, and they replace her. Sometimes when they replace her, sometimes before they extinguish her, you might have 2 queens running around in a hive. I remember the first time I saw that, I'm like, wow, this is great, tons of brood, great, 2 queens. So supersedure. The other one we all hate, the reason why we are beekeepers, is to prevent swarming, and that's another reason why. Their nest, their cavity, their hive gets crowded. They fill it up with nectar, they fill it up with brood. She's like, hey guys, I'm out of space, and they're like, okay, let's split, and they do. And we want to try to prevent that from happening. And finally, emergency. Maybe we do something and we kill the queen, or who knows, maybe some natural thing happens and the queen dies. And so the bees will raise a queen. So out of the 3 reasons, what we want to do as beekeepers raising quality queens is we want to replicate 2 out of the 3 reasons. Okay, and we don't want to go into Queen Week, so supersedure is not really a choice, but we can put them in a situation where they want to swarm and where they're in emergency, where they have no queen, and now we can raise good quality queens. And one thing just to think about is, when do bees raise their queens? In the swarm season. So in the swarm season, they have all the nectar and pollen and the population that they need, so that's a great time to do it. You want to think about, like, what is the criteria that you want to look for when you're thinking about which queen do I breed from? And so, you know, is it your best hive? That's probably a good one to choose. Good build-up, I like that. I like pulling frames out early on and seeing a nice blue pattern early, because a good build-up does lead you to more honey production. Might be a good thing you're into. You don't want to pop the top and have them fly in your face. A temperament's a good thing, you know. Probably here in the city, that might be a good thing too. I don't know how the neighbor thing goes, but maybe. Hygienic behavior, how well they clean. That's a great trait. And then longevity, how long they live. So you can think, like, if they don't live very long, that's probably not a good trait. But if they live a while, that might be something worth looking at. So as I read, and I read other beekeeper stuff, a guy talked about the importance of marking your queens. If you mark your queen with the corresponding color for that year, you'll know how old she is. And so, like, I had this one queen, I was like, she's still around. I thought, she must have something some other ones don't. And so I read her for a while. Okay, so, you know, sometimes if you have one hive, that's the hive you pick. It just depends. And those are the decisions that you get to make. There's a ton of different methods. Doolittle is where you graft the larvae out of the cell into a queen cell. The Miller method is one I'm going to propose maybe that you might want to try later on. The alley method is where you basically take a frame out and, you know, worker cells are built in a horizontal fashion. Queen cells are built in a vertical fashion. So this guy, I can't remember his first name, but Allie was his last name, he said, okay, what if you take a frame out, turn it like this, and put it over top the top bars, and let the bees draw these cells down? Yeah, worked for him, and I've seen it work for a lot of people. Cell punch method. This is basically where you take a piece of tubing or something, and you actually go in and you punch out a cell, and then you kind of glue it down with wax in a vertical fashion, somewhat like this, and you raise queens that way, no grafting involved. The gentry method is a popular newer method where you have a plastic box, you put your queen in the plastic box, she lays in the plastic cells, 4 days, you take them out, you put them on a cell bar, and you don't have to graft there either. And then the first method I tried, because it was pretty simple, is on the spot queen rearing. And that's simply you just pull your queen out and let the hive do the rest. And that's pretty simple. I can talk about, like, if you get the best queens that way or not, but it's a pretty simple way. That's the way I first started. One of the keys you want to know about if you're going to try this is it's all about timing. And this is the bad thing about it. Like, if it's raining and it's day 10, you got to do your thing, okay? So I don't know what you know, but the queen lays an egg in the cell, and it's an egg for like 3.5 days. And it will actually stand up. It's actually horizontal, but if you think about it, when we look in there, it's standing up. So after 3 days, it's fallen over and actually hatches into a larva. You want to graft that larva if you're grafting. And this may not be if you're like, you know, not really accomplished or whatever, never done before, grafting's not the first method you pick. Okay, it's kind of hard. So, but this is when the bees would turn a worker larva into a queen, like 3.5 days. So you would scoop it out, you put it in your queen cup, and you would go about. The thing you want to notice is that in green, there's a 10-day cycle from when you started or the bees started to when it's time to do something with it. That 10-day period is going to be important when you're going to do an easier method I'm going to recommend here later. 10 days is important. Now, here's the other thing. So 10 days, and then about day 16, she hatches out. She walks around the hive, she hardens up, they feed her, she takes her mating flight, and then she's laying. So basically a month. That's a while. So I think in Suzanne's letter it said that the raising nukes was a better alternative because it was a lot of work. Queen rearing is a lot of work. So maybe I'll talk about that later too, but I'm just going to run through this because you may not be trying this. But grafting is where you actually take a tool. This is like an older tool, and a lot of these pictures I just pulled off the internet because I had to make a presentation, a couple years ago. But I use a Chinese grafting tool that allows you to get royal jelly and the larva. This is an older type, and you just pick the larva up with that. But anyway, you check the larva into queen cups, and then they start to draw them out. When you're looking for the appropriate age larva, here you can see the eggs that are standing up, if you will. Here you can see there are larvae that are clearly evident. They have a C shape, they're kind of large. These are too old, those are too young. You want to look for something in the middle, okay? I was reading from some of those books, and one guy said, once you get over 40, you may want to go to the drugstore and get yourself a pair of readers. I was 40 thinking, this guy don't know what he's talking about. Then I got like 40 couple, and I went to the drugstore and got something, and it was like, these things, here's the thing, you can't graft that egg, but the larva is going to be the size of a comma in the newspaper. It's going to be tiny. And so even if you have really good vision, it's probably a good idea to get a pair of magnifiers of some sort. So you would pick this up and you would put this in your queen cell. Now, a better view is, here's a little close-up. Here's an egg, there's a larva. It's in a small pool of royal jelly. This is a little different grafting tool. Still not the one that I use, but you want to try to get the larva and the jelly that it's sitting in. And then therefore that larva never comes out of contact with royal jelly. Because if there's a break in the royal jelly, there's going to be a break in the quality of the queen that you can get. Okay, so, that's just part of it. So, anyway, appropriate age larva. Sometimes, depending on if you're going to raise a bunch or a few or how many, you have a cell bar frame. And this is where you transfer the larvae into these cups. And you're going to put this in a hive, which I'm going to show you here in a second. But that's just a piece of equipment you would use if you were grafting. One of the easiest ways to get them going is you make a starter box. And again, these are pictures that allow me to show you a starter box. This is a new, and it's open here. Your starter box is not open. You're going to trap the bees in there for 24 hours. You're going to load the thing up with as many bees as you can get, and you have to have appropriate age bees. They need to be nurse bees. You need to shape probably at least a super or hive body of nurse bees into a nuke. How do you do that? You find wet brood that they're feeding, and you shake them in, and you go frame after frame after frame. In this, you also want a frame of pollen, a frame of nectar, and 2 drawing frames, just to take up the bee space. You'll have one left over, and that's where you're going to stick that grafting frame in there. But, there's different examples. The whole point is they have to be loaded with bees. A high density, as Michael Bush would say. You have the larvae in there for about 24 hours, and then you're going to transfer it to a finisher. Now, a finisher hive is basically a larger hive that you break down and you crowd the bees. Like swarming was the thing we talked about replicating. You want to crowd them so they want to swarm. And if they want to swarm, they'll build queen cells, and they'll build them very well. So you need a high population of bees in your finisher. And they'll be in here for till about the 10th day when you graft it. So these are going to draw, they're going to finish them off, they're going to incubate them, and you want to pull them out before they hatch. Because y'all know what happens when one hatches, right? Then you get one queen, and you did a bunch of work. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for, drawn queen cells, and how you transfer that into a nuke or whatever you choose to start with. Okay? One of the things you want to look for when grafting is, you may not see this first off, but you can look and see that this blue cell is white all the way. That is packed with royal jelly. This one, that's pretty good, but it's not packed. Some of these other ones, this one's about half full. Okay, down here, this is close, but they're not full. You want these cells to be packed full of royal jelly, more royal jelly than those larvae can consume. They never run out of high-quality feed, and that's one way you're going to get to quality queens. Another good sign of a quality, well-fed queen is the cells are sculptured. They have divots on like a golf ball. This is another indicator of well-fed. A lot of times on your frame, they'll actually draw a comb in this empty space because there's so much feed available. And that's the thing. Swarm season's a great time. So you have to reproduce that by giving them sugar water or pollen substitutes or frames of pollen or nectar. You got to have all the resources to build and make quality queens. Then you're going to transfer it to a frame. You can stick it in a wax like this one. You can put it on top of the cell bars of a mating coop like this. These are easy ways to have that thing hatch out into whatever you're going to put it into. Probably you ought to put it into a mating coop. 5 frames, 3 frames, 2 frames. I'll show you that in a second. Now, the reason why it's good for you to be able to make your own queens is you're going to call somebody up in where? Down south, or you're going to, wherever you call them up from, doesn't really matter. They are going to, well, I'm getting one step ahead of myself. These are California guinea cages, and you can let your queens hatch out in here, and then you can screen them. Because, you know, if someone wants an Italian, and you send them a yellow bee, why, well, it's probably Italian. Or if you want a Carniolan, and they get a dark bee, well, that's probably a Carniolan then. So anyway, you get to screen, and you get to look large, small, coloration, stripe, solid color. You get to evaluate them. I don't do this, but some people do. You can also put them in an incubator. And so here you see this queen cell hatches out, and this is a beautiful queen, but she hatches out in an incubator and not in a hive. I don't do this either, because I want her to be taken care of as soon as she comes out by other bees. But if you're mass producing them, sometimes resources are of a premium, so you might incubate them. Now, regardless, every queen, there's only one queen in a hive. So when you're making queens, you need to have a mating nuke for every queen. So every one of these is a mating nuke. Okay, these are some parent hives that they probably came from. Now here's the thing, for every queen, in this case, you need 5 frames. Well, how many you got? Start with. So you've got to have 5 frames from a parent hive. We're now talking about are you going to be making any honey? So you kind of got to choose what direction you want to go. Okay? And you know how they say like it takes money to make money? Well, it takes bees to make bees. And so resources are very important. Now, some people say, well, you know what? If I have 5 frames, that's 5 frames I need, or I could make 3 frames. And that queen can hatch out in fewer resources. Good idea. So you don't have to go 5 frames. As a matter of fact, I'll show you in a minute, you can go way less than 5 frames. Here's a mating yard, and you can see that these nukes are facing, this is this way, and that's facing the other way. The hole is this way. That way when the queen goes out and mates and comes back, she doesn't get confused. Because if she goes to the wrong one, and there's 2 in there, then you lost one. Same way with here, these are mating nukes. These are different colors, and you saw the kid's hives over there. They're also facing different directions to make sure that the queens don't come back into the wrong nuke. Now, I put the slide in there to show you different colors, different directions, feeding, but here's the main thing. A lot of commercial producers, and it kind of depends on who you talk to, say styrofoam mating nuke. And there are wooden frames up top here, kind of like top bar hives. It takes 1 cup of bees. Put 1 cup of bees in here, sugar water in there. They draw these top bar frames down. You put your queen cell in there, it's 1 cup of bees. Not a frame, not 3 frames, not 5 frames, but 1 cup. That's conserving resources. So, but at the end of the season, you get all those little teeny combs. Then what do you do? And then try to start over next year. I don't know. I don't use those either, but they're something you can do. If you were a commercial queen breeder, like somebody you find in a magazine, you're producing all these queens, and then what do you do with them? Because we're talking about resources. So what they do is they bank them. And so here you can see there's approximately 30, I forget how many do it, about 30 queens are being held here. Okay? This is, like sometimes, packages don't really, the packages, people aren't satisfied with packages. Sometimes the queen gets superseded, sometimes they don't make it, sometimes she's a drone layer. Well, if you think about this whole process, you call somebody up, hey, I need a queen, okay, I'll ship her out tomorrow. So they go to this bank, and we don't really know how long she's been in here, but they go to the bank, they put her in a cage, they ship her to you, so she's in the mail to you the second day. Okay? Maybe the third day, this has been the second day. You take her out, and you put her in your hive the next day. And then 2 days later, they eat the candy and release the queen. So she's been held up 4 or 5 days. And that's really saying, before we talk about how long she's been in there. Well, I don't know, I've coached sports for about 25 years. I know people have racehorses, and I know like when you're training athletes or you're training racehorses, you work them up to the competition date. Well, your queen is like an athlete or a racehorse. You want that queen to develop. And so if you take her in her premium maturation time and you put her in a bank, it's like saying to that racehorse, hey, I know we got a race in a week or two, but why don't you go to stable for a little while? Just hang out, What results do you expect to get? If you cut the most important queen in the hive, if you cut her maturation off and have her stop laying, her ovaries or ovarioles will not perform as they would if you trained her the whole time. So queen banks, in my opinion, are not good. And I wouldn't bank a queen. Here's some other banks, whatever. Here's what I do. I have a 10-frame hive, and I split it into 4 sections. I put 2 frames in each one. So I only take 2 frames to raise 1 queen. It helps me to conserve resources. Like I said, you can do a couple bees, but I don't know.
Are they deeps or medium?
This is a deep, okay? But I can put a medium frame in there, and I can put it back in my hive, and I can switch things back and forth. And if I find a frame with a queen cell on it, like a swarm cell, what do? Throw it away? No, stick it in there. Let her mature, let her mate, let her come back. There are holes on the opposite side. Here's one hole, there's one, and there's one. So that way, when she flies out, she'll do an orientation flight, so she'll know which side of this box to come back on. But this works out very well. And, this is a nice little thing to have. And I made these with a table saw.
That's what that is, so if people want to see it afterwards, they can come up and look how it's built.
And hey, if something happened, you got a little behind, and your hive made a couple queen cells, you got a chance to make more bees. If you got 2 queens laying versus 1 queen laying, you can make twice the amount of brood. So why, this is a nice little tool to have.
So what you said at the beginning, supersedure you don't want to avoid if you can, but a queen is produced as if for supersedure, you might as well take advantage of her. There's nothing wrong with her.
Well, if they're superseding her, probably her pheromones diminishing.
No, but you're saying take what are the supersedure cells and putting them in your nuke.
Well, you want to get a swarm cell and put in your nuke. Like it's going to be on the bottom of the frame. Because normally swarm cells will be on the bottom of the frame.
Okay.
Supersedure cells will be like up in the brood area, but towards the edge of the brood area. Okay, so, but either way, it's a tool that you can use to make increase. This is just past December. So you see that short guy's made, and here we have these 1 box, and there's 4 queens in there, 2 frame hives in December. It's amazing. I've done these little experiments, like how long will these go? Will these go all year? And so I've actually overwintered 2 framers over the winter. Okay, this winter, well, we didn't have that great success. But either way, it was like an experiment. Let's try it, see what happens. So here I've opened them up, You can see I'm putting the cluster in there, the cluster bees. This is this December. And here you can see, there they are. And if we hadn't had such a crazy winter, they probably would have made it. Because they can share heat back and forth, so that helps. And this small cluster doesn't eat that much honey, so I'm not recommending you do this, okay? This is just me experimenting. I'm a science teacher. Yeah.
Is that the one you're using for something?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Yes.
I think Mike Palmer does the same thing, but he cuts his hive in quarters, crisscross.
Yes, he has,
And he has a mini frames.
yes, he does.
Right.
This also is a kind of a similar concept because he overwinters nukes side by side. And he talks about how you don't just have like one cluster here and one cluster here, but you have two half clusters to make a whole cluster between the two boxes. And it's the same idea with this. They can share heat. You know, it's a similar kind of way. Yep. So here's some of my stuff. This is the queen. She's marked white, so it's been a couple of years. But you can see that here's the end of her wings. Sort of added and extends past her wings quite a way. She's quite large. She was well fed. She was well reared. She had all the resources, all the carbohydrates for nectar, all the pollen, all protein, a lot of bees to feed her in her development. So nice queen. You can see her brood pattern is also very nice. Okay, this was early, a couple years ago. This was early, like it was March or April, but it was early. Okay, you can see the grass is not really breathing so much. So again, the brood pattern is nice. Here's a different one. Okay, and she's striped a little bit. Some people call it tiger stripe, but she's darker in general. There's a cool thing. When you take one queen and you grab from one queen, all of her daughters don't look alike. This is the crazy. I love this. I love checking this out. Like, when a queen mates, she'll mate with 10 to 20 drones. So you have like all these combinations that could result. And when you graft that little larva out of there, you have no idea what the genes are. It's a chance. And then so when you watch these things emerge and they look different, I find it fascinating. I love checking that out. Here's a great comment that I found when reading Dr. Marl Spivak and Harry Gruber's Queen Ring Manual, that fully reared queens of productive stock generally will be inferior to well-reared queens from less productive stock. We had Michael Palmer come down last week to speak to us in Delaware. And we were having dinner the night before, and we got talking about queen rearing. I said, yes, and there's this quote that stuck with me from Dr. Farrar, and it was in this manual, and he just quoted it, verbatim. This is well-fed, well-reared is more important than genetics. And so the bees that you have that survive the winter, that's all you really need, okay? So here's what we want to talk about. What can you do to raise queens and not really have to graft? The first time I tried this, I found this guy. I really can't pronounce his name. No, this is self-colon. I can't. I'm not really sure how to pronounce his name. But the guy was on to something, and he is one to come up with on-the-spot queen rearing. He's got a pretty good technique. Basically, he just says, pull your queen out, let the bees make a new one. Now, what he says is that, and this is very true, this is an older comb, and bees have been in here and have left cocoons. Bees cannot chew through cocoons and turn a horizontal worker cell into a vertical queen cell. They cannot. So they have to pack royal jelly in there and float that larva out to then turn the cell down. Well, that's a lot of royal jelly, it's a long distance. Could the larva come out of contact with the royal jelly? Yes. So what he says is you tear down the bottom third of the cell of the appropriate age larva. So you got to know that they're somewhere in the 12 to 36 hour old range. You tear the cells down, and hopefully they pick one of these and can now pull the cell down in a vertical fashion. So I tried this first. I had a Down the road was a tree, a storm, you know, half the tree fell over. I was riding by one time, I looked up, and caught my eye, and I saw combs sticking out of what was left. I'm like, oh man, what? Yeah. So I went back, and I knocked on the guy's door and said, hey, would you mind if I got those bees? He said, help yourself. So I went home, I got my chainsaw, and I went and I got those bees. And like hours and hours and hours, and I got those bees. So anyway, I got them back, and the flow was over, whatever. They weren't performing. And I'm like, these bees, man, they stink. And I'm thinking about it takes resources to make bees. And I'm thinking, I don't want to sacrifice my honey, so I'm going to sacrifice this hive. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to pull that queen out of there. I'm going to tear these cells down like this guy suggests, and I'm going to see what happens. And this was like, I don't know, it might have been 2 boxes, maybe. And so I did that. And next thing you know, that hive turned into 4 nukes.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is all right. I can do this. So then I started like, okay, what else? I tried a cloakboard method, and then I worked my way into grafting. But I thought, man, this is pretty cool. So how can we do that better? Well, if you know what the timing in the 10 days it takes to turn appropriate age larva into a queen that you need to get somewhere else, and the first queen out doesn't kill the rest of them, that 10-day period is important. You guys know about like foundationless frames and stuff? Okay, well, this is wax foundation. You can see the wire going through there. I don't really use that. It doesn't really matter if you use it or not, but this will be, you can take a knife and you can cut this wax. You can't cut plastic. Okay? So, this wax is fresh. No bees have ever emerged here. There are no cocoons here. There's an egg, and there's some other eggs around here. If you had this scenario going on, with a decent population, you could pull your queen out, put her in a nuke, they would make who knows how many queen cells. 3, 4, 10, 15, who knows. So if you know the timing, you pull her out, 10 days later you want to come back and you want to check out where they are. And so that's when you have to make your decisions. Because what's going to happen is they're going to be an emergency. Okay, here's the, I kind of got ahead of myself a little bit. Here is the foundation. You see the little starter strip right here? Some people use a paint stir, some people use a popsicle stick. And then the bees will pull down the comb. And then if you have eggs in here or larvae, this is beautiful. This is the Miller method. And he had comb that he actually cut in these points like this. And let the queen lay in there. He pulled the queen out. And they drew swarm cells off these edges. You can take a knife and cut them out just as easy as anything. You can divide your bees up, put a queen cell in, and how many nukes you want to make. So no grafting. You just have to know 10 days after you pull that queen out, you got to be back. Because if you're not, and one hatches, you'll have 1 queen. Which might not be a bad idea either, but you could have more. So, you plan ahead. You think, okay, the nectar flow is going to be coming in. I want to get a good population, but before the nectar flow is over, I want to put my foundationless frame in there, or my wax foundation in there, and I want to have new wax. She gets eggs in there. You pull her out with maybe 2 frames of brood, and maybe a frame of nectar, pollen, and you put it in the nuke. Any old bees are going to fly back to the parent colony. Okay? But if you have a queen here, and you have wet brood, not capped, but developing, then the nurse bees are going to stay with those, and they're going to take care of those. And there'll be enough there to take care of the queen. And she'll continue to lay. And any flyers go back, and that's okay. It's totally fine. So 10 days after you did this, you got to come back to see where they are, and what are you going to do with your queen cells. And like I said, you do foundationless, or you have wax foundation that they can sculpt any way they want, you're going to be in business. One of the keys, and this is a thing I got from Michael Bush, is he talked about density of bees. You want a lot of mouths feeding a few queens. So if you had like 2 stories or 3 stories, you want to pack them down so that they are loaded, so they want to swarm. And then they're going to make queen cells, and that is you want them to do. Okay, so this is an exaggeration or not, but obviously this thing's packed. And you want a whole bunch of mouths getting a few larvae, and man, you're going to get something nice in return. So, you plan ahead. You put your foundationless in there. You put your wax in there, whatever. You know that there's eggs in there. You pull your queen out, you put her in a nuke. You check your parent hive 10 days later. And then, if you don't have any more equipment, then you say, okay, I don't want 10 queens hatching out and fighting it out, and potentially one of them takes off with half my bees. So then you go in there and say, okay, if I don't have any more equipment, then I just take and I knock the cells down, destroy all the cells but 2. And then the 2 of them can figure out who stays and who doesn't. And now you have a nuke and a brand new queen. And then I'll tell you what, new queens lay eggs like it's nobody's business. I'm telling you what, they will knock your socks off. So here's your queen cells. This one's not even finished yet, okay? But you got to go back to 10 days because if one of these comes out, you're waiting on that one. You got 1 queen. You can take a knife. You can cut these out, and you can divide your brood up into like 3 more nukes, and you put a queen cell in each one or 2 queen cells in each one. You're going to have 3 nukes plus your original queen. You can take your hive and make 4 nukes. And then, if 1 dies, okay, you still got 3. If 2 dies, you still got 2. If 3 die, you still got 1. I mean,
That's
what
an
a deal.
optimist there.
What a deal. You know? I mean, Michael Bush talked to us last week about sustainability. How do you not have to buy bees anymore? And so this is my take on his deal. And so, you know, I started out with 1 hive. You know, I learned how to rear queens, and next thing you know, I had 70. Like 1 year, I ran out of equipment, like, I don't know, 10 times. I was going to New Jersey, Harvey's like, yeah, need 25 nukes. Okay, here you go. And I mean, I kept going back, and they're like, what's going on here? You know, I ran out of equipment. There's something to this, you know. And these new queens, man, you got to keep up with them. They can lay like crazy. So you got 1 box, I'm good. No, you're not good. Go get some more. So you're going to need it. So anyway, you just figure out what you're going to do with the queen cells. You know, maybe you only want 2 hives. So maybe you give them to a friend. You know, you have to decide what you're going to do with them. Here's a different one. You know, again, we're foundationless, natural comb. I mean, look at those things, man. Those things are beautiful. All right, there's going to be a fat queen in there, and a fat queen is going to have some fat ovaries, and fat ovaries lay a lot of eggs. So, it's good stuff. Okay, so here's someone, I don't know who this is. Again, I picture it off the internet. But, you know, you start out with 1 hive, and now you have, what? What do you know, 1 nuke, and then 2 nukes. Okay, so if you have mites, and I don't treat, and you get a 70 hives, and I'm not treating, and then over a couple of years, you're kind of like, this was a bad work. But, you know, I still have 50. So, that's good. But if you have 1, and you lose 1, the fun starts to fade. But man, you know, I mean, I stopped selling queens. Man, I'm telling you what, you graft them, and then 10 days later, you know, well then you have to, you graft them, and then you make a starter. You shake all these bees, you make a starter box. You put them in there. 24 hours later, you put them in a finisher colony. 9 days later, you put them in mating nukes. Well, before you put them in mating nukes, you got to make the mating nukes up. So you steal bees from all your hives, you make up mating nukes. Queens start laying, and they lay. So when you got a little hive and a queen, you got to check it a lot. And I'm like, working, and somebody calls up, hey, can I get a queen? Oh, yeah, sure, come on over. Which one don't I want to save? Which one do I, you know, and once you have like, you know, those 4 ways and you got like 10 of them and you got like 40 to choose from, you got to forget which one is which. But I think to myself, man, I spent how much time and she's going to walk away for $20. My time is worth more than $20, let me tell you. So I transitioned to, I'm going to keep her in the nuke and I'll sell the nuke next year for whatever, okay? Michael Bush has told us that he sold 100 nukes to Better Bee No, they're not tell you the price. They were outrageous. They already sold them like that. Supply and demand is crazy. But here's the thing, if you have one hive and you lose it, and you could have done this, I mean, hey, that's sustainability. And that's what we want to do. We want to breed local bees that are acclimated to our climate. And you can treat or not treat, that's still your choice. But you don't want to go buy them from somewhere else. And you can simply do these techniques that I'm telling you now, and you can make your own hives. So there's plenty of methods. Okay? You pick one, you give it a try. You get nothing to lose. Hey, what if your queen cells fail? You take that nuke with your queen, and you put her back in there, and you still got your one hive. So you really don't have a lot to lose. So anyway. Anybody have any questions? Yes?
There's a period of time after which the queen cell is capped, but it's not hatched.
Correct.
Is that when some people sell you a queen cell and you put it in your hive and then it
Yes.
hatches in your hive? What is, can you talk about?
Okay. That is a very critical time. As I said, 10 days gives you a day or two to play with before she hatches out. Because you're going to graft on day 3.5 or 4, plus 10 more is 14, and she hatches out in 16. If you handle those queen cells too early and her wings are developing, you can damage her, and then her wings will be damaged, and the bee will sense that, and they will replace her. So you can damage queen cells by handling too early, but you can find people that will sell you queen cells. The only problem is you got to get them in your hive like today, because there's that critical time period. You don't want to handle them really before that 10th day, because they're susceptible to injury. And the bee will sense that she's injured, and they'll reject her or they'll replace her. Anybody else have any other questions?
What mostly split a single hive? Like how many nukes have you gotten out of a single hive? 2 frame, 5 frame, what have you?
Well, that's a good question. I think, you know, to take one hive and make 3 nukes and have 4 hives altogether is probably like the limit. Because you have to say to yourself, one, you got to have enough brood to put in the nukes. So how much brood do you have? That's going to limit how many nukes you can make. Okay, now you can do this more than one time, but the best time is on a nectar flow, because that's when the bees want to raise their queens. You have all the nectar or carbohydrates, you have all the protein and pollen, you have a large population, and this is where you want to do it. If you do it another time, you got to feed. But you can do it all year long, but the best time is swarm season. So I would say 4, but I mean, it just depends. If you got 2 frames, and you got that little box I showed you, 2 frames and a queen cell, you got a hive. So what I try to do is I try not to rob too many bees from one hive, and I'll take maybe a frame or 2 from this one, frame or 2 from that one, and it's kind of like swarm control too, because they get the population's too high, they'll want to swarm. So I can take a couple frames out, make up mating nukes, and then I can grab and I can raise my queens on the cell bars. I just pull them off and put them in. And, you know, if you raise, I ain't trying to raise too many cells at one time, because here's the key. A bunch of nurse bees to a few cells. So if I raise 20 cells in a crowded hive, I know they're all going to be well fed. And then I need 20 mating nukes, 40 frames of brood. 40 frames is quite a bit. So, but I like to, here's the thing about selling queens too, because I didn't mention this first off. Your queen should lay for 3 weeks to ensure that she's fully developed. So, you know, it took a month before she laid. And then you want to let her lay for 3 more weeks. So we're talking a lot of time. Okay, a lot of checking on her. A lot of stuff to get her there. And then she walks away for $20. It's not really worth it. Okay, but, so that's my thing. If I can, like, somehow teach people to raise queens, you don't have to have that break in the brood cycle. She doesn't have to be in a bank. She doesn't spend days in the mail. She doesn't have to spend, 2 days getting released by your worker bees. But you can make up queens and nukes to replace losses before you have a loss. And, I'm telling you what, when you raise a queen, it doesn't really matter if it's a swarm cell, and you transfer it. She comes out, she's yours, That feels good. I mean, it just does. So, I've had a lot of fun with doing this. And I get attached to them. And I don't want to leave, I made her. Well, they made her, but,
Hell.
I knew the timing, Tricked them. Yes.
When you put it in a starter, what's the magic with 24 hours? Does 48 not help anymore? Just have that second day?
Well, research has shown that it's not beneficial any more or less. Some people will go 36 hours, but you have a limited number of bees in that 5-frame nuke. So then you get it in a 2 or 3-story hive that has, 5 or 6 times the population to take care of them. That's way better. So basically that starter box gets them started, and then you put them in a larger colony to finish the job.
So why doesn't it just work? It's the same set of cells on the same cell bars, right?
Right.
And so why not just move them, why not just put them straight into the big colony? Why is there a starter and a finisher?
Well, because here's what happens. The starter has no queen. And as, I don't coin this phrase, but as many beekeepers have said, they're desperate. They are hopelessly queenless. They are in emergency. They have to make queen or they die. So if you have a colony that has a queen that's queen right, they're not in dire straits. They're like, no, I don't yet. But you take the queen out, and they're like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And they do what you want them to do. So the starter really is, there are queen breeders that do manipulations where they do queen right, starter, and finishers. Okay, so there are so many ways to do this. But what I've found is that if you've got a starter box that has no queen, no larvae, only the larvae you give them, they're hopelessly queenless. And they have one job in mind, one job only. Forget foraging. We got to feed these cells and make a queen. And so you get a great start.
How long do you have them queenless in that little starter?
You can do 24 hours, but you don't have to. What I normally do is, so I work in the daytime, I come home at night, and I figure out what strong hive am I going to rob a deep or a super of nurse bees from. And then, so what I'll do is I'll make sure the queen's not on any of those frames, and I'll shake as many nurse bees as I can get in the nuke. Maybe 2 supers worth. I chalk that thing full. And then, I live in an old farmhouse, it's a dirt cellar. So then I take it down into this dirt cellar. Now my nuke has a screen on the bottom so they can breathe. Because you got a ton of bees, you make a lot of heat, and you have to keep them cool. Larry Connor talks about putting a wet sponge in there so they have moisture too. And so then I have in my basement. Well, then I go get the frame I'm going to graft from. I graft my cells. Once I have that cell bar grafted, I take it down to the basement. I wrap the box on some concrete blocks. The bees fall down, pull the lid off, stick them in, put the lid on. They're hopelessly queenless, and they have one job to do.
They're not going out because you trapped them.
And they're trapped. They cannot fly. And they're all the right age to feed, and that's key, as you have young nurse bees that you shook off wet brood. So that's important. Yeah.
Could you graft and put the queen cell in the starter before you dump bees in the starter?
You could, but here's the thing. Those larvae are susceptible to drying out, so they'll desiccate. So when you graft, you really want to have wet paper towels. Like as soon as I put one larva into a queen cell, it's covered with a wet paper towel. And as I work down that cell bar, I'm sliding my wet paper towel down to keep moisture over all those larvae. When I take the larva out of my kitchen or wherever I am, and I put it in the starter, every bar is wrapped in wet paper towel. Right before I take that box and I wrap it on the concrete block it's sitting on, because I want air to circulate, I take that wet paper towel off, wrap them down, pull the lid off, stick them in, and now they're going to be kept moist.
If you go the other way, they could dry out because there's no
Yeah.
bees to.
Yeah, because, I mean, how long is it going to take you to go through a super to shake bees in there? It's going to take you a little bit. So, and plus, here's the other thing, that when you're grafting, those bees realize they don't have a queen. And so, bless you. So, you could wait 24 hours, and they would really be in panic. So, you don't have to though. So, but what I was proposing with you about taking a starter strip and having young eggs, aka larvae, in that fresh wax. I mean, you got everything you need there. You got all the nectar, you got all the pollen, you got all the bees, and they have no queen. They know what to do, and you don't have to graft or anything. And it's a good way to start the first time. And then you're like, I can do this, and then you can start grafting. You got to start somewhere. And for me, I was like, it's taboo. Like, no one grafted queens. No one was a queen rearer in our area. Our inspector said, I don't know if I'd try that if I were you. What? I can do that. I read 10 books. And I read 10 books and still tried to do it without grafting. I mean, it's a thing. I didn't want to fail, so. Yes,
How come with the starter from you only get a couple of bees?
because it's only like this big.
Oh,
So it is-
hold that, okay.
It's tiny. And inside that little thing, one little part of it is where you put the sugar water, and you got like 3 kind of top bar frames. So the area is very small. But it only takes a couple bees, so it's all about resources. Anybody else have a question? Yes?
I'm not sure what the question is, but when I was reading some of this, and I'm like where you were at the very beginning, it said you need to put frames of pollen in so that they have the protein that they need to produce the royal jelly.
Yes.
So I'm not sure if you said that while you were going through it, but just in terms of what research